Good morning. The Article 2 revisions remind us that our Unitarian Universalist faith calls us to put love at the center, to be accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. Now, living with this ethic of love may sound easy in theory, but it can be difficult in practice, especially when we are faced with those who would oppress us or the people we care about, or when we're losing hope or are overwhelmed by all the world is demanding of us. How do we find the spiritual reserves to put love at the center, to put it into action, to demonstrate that the boundary of our love is not decided by someone else's anger or resentment, but is instead driven by our own deep empathy and a call to create and maintain the kind of world we want the young people in our lives to inherit?
We are living our love into being, living our love into being. With each breath we take and each step we make, we are living our love into being. We are learning our love into being. We are learning our love into being. With each breath we take and each step we make, we are living our love into being. We are speaking our love into being, speaking our love into being. With each breath we take and each step we make, we are speaking our love into being. We are working our love into being, working our love into being. With each breath we take and each breath we make, we are working our love into being. We are singing our love into being, singing our love into being. With each breath we take and each step we make, we are singing our love into being. We are singing our love into being.
The flaming chalice is the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist tradition, the liberal religious tradition to which this congregation belongs. If you have a chalice at home, I invite you to light yours with us now. And will those of you here in person please stand as you are able for our chalice lighting. Saying together, as we kindle this flame, we recommit ourselves to nurturing the spirits of one another and the common good of the world we share. May the light of this flame be welcoming to all who seek a liberal religious home. For those of you already standing, I invite you to remain standing for our opening hymn. It's We Laugh, We Cry, number 354.
Dedicate our minds and hearts to see it.
Please be seated. Good morning. My name is Sarah Ford-Knorr. I'm your worship associate this morning, as well as your board president here at UUFR. Whether you are a first-time visitor or a long-established member, I'd like to offer you a special welcome. Here at the Unitarian Universalist of Raleigh, we are intentionally inclusive, liberally religious, and actively serving the common good of our shared world. Whoever you are and wherever you are on your own spiritual journey, you are welcome here. If you're visiting us for the first time in person, I'd like to invite you to stop by our welcome stand out in the foyer. You can fill out a visitor form, get a name tag, and pick up one of our pamphlets to find out more about Unitarian Universalism and UUFR in particular. And if you're visiting us online, I invite you to fill out our online visitor form. If you do this, you'll start receiving our weekly e-newsletter called The Chalice. This morning, Eleanor Goodwin, one of our lay ministers, will be available in the front right corner of the sanctuary here to talk with anyone who might be experiencing a difficult circumstance in their life and would just like to talk with someone. I hope all of you will read through the chalice that you should have received by email on Thursday about the many, many things happening at UUFR. Our in-person social hour this morning will be downstairs in Founders Hall, per usual, and I now invite you to meet and greet your neighbor. Good morning. I invite you to continue these conversations later on in social hour. Don't make me ring the gong. This is a time in our service when we acknowledge some of the joys and sorrows in our community. We do this because we believe that a joy shared is a joy made greater, and a sorrow shared may be made easier to bear. Anyone is invited to email a joy or sorrow to our special email address, joysandsorrows@uufr.org, before 9 a.m. on Sunday. You're also invited to light a candle if you wish, or place a card in the basket so that your joy or sorrow can be shared with all of us. This morning, we lit a candle to honor the memory of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny, who died in prison this week at the age of 47. Our hearts are with his family and with the people of Russia who dream of freedom and democracy. Shannon New asks us to send healing thoughts to her friend Betsy, whose son died of an accidental drug overdose 2 days before his 19th birthday. Jane Ulrich shares that Gertrude Ulrich, her mother-in-law, died on February 13th at the age of 94. Jane has been in California caring for her and is now glad to be back in Raleigh. Jane, we hold you in our hearts during this time of loss and transition. Rebecca Mayhew shares that her husband Nicholas broke his tibia earlier this week playing soccer with one of their kids. Rebecca says it will be a long recovery, so thoughts and prayers for healing are most welcome. And longtime member Marge Link fell last weekend and had surgery on Monday to get, as she says, a fancy new hip. She is now recovering well at home. Marge, I know that you are watching online this morning, and we are all sending our healing wishes to you. As we hold these shared life events in our hearts and reflect on the joys, sorrows, fears, and hopes of our own lives, let's be together in stillness and silence, opening ourselves to that spirit within us and amidst us, called by many names, but known to every human heart. After the silence, we'll sing When Our Heart Is in a Holy Place. But now let's be together in stillness.
When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we tell our stories from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we share the silence of sacred space, and the God of our hearts stirs within, and we feel the power of each other's faith, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place.
Everything that we do here at UUFR is only possible because of the generous financial support that so many of us provide. If you would like to make a contribution this morning, we invite you to bring it forward and put it in one of our 3 offering plates. And if you'd prefer to have an usher come to you, please just raise your hand. You can also give using any of the methods that will be put up on the screen. What is given with generosity will be received with gratitude. Thank you. Both Reverend James and Reverend Sasha are away from UUFR this morning, and it is my honor to introduce our guest speaker this morning, Alyssa Lee. Originally from the Oklahoma City area, Alyssa served as an attorney, mediator, and civil rights officer for a number of state agencies in Oklahoma before hearing the call towards Unitarian Universalist ministry. She recently graduated from the Meadville Lombard Theological School, and she's currently serving as the minister of Brookfield Unitarian Universalist Church in Brookfield, Massachusetts. She resides now in Massachusetts with her spouse and 7-year-old son. Please give her a warm welcome to UUFR.
Thank you all for such a warm welcome. I'm so grateful to be here with you today. Reading today is an excerpt from author, poet, and social critic Bell Hooks, her book All About Love. Love is an action, a participatory emotion. Whether we are engaged in a process of self-love or loving others, we must move beyond the realm of feeling to actualize love. This is why it is useful to see love as a practice. When we act, we need not feel inadequate or powerless. We can trust that there are concrete steps to take on love's path. We learn to communicate, to be still, and to listen to the needs of our hearts, and we learn to listen to others. We learn compassion by being willing to hear the pain as well as the joy of those we love. The path to love is not arduous or hidden, but we must choose to take the first step.
My heart is ready, and what am I gonna do? My heart is ready, and what am I gonna do? My heart is ready, and what am I gonna do? Oh God, my heart is ready, and what am I gonna do? My heart is ready, and what am I gonna do? My hands are ready, and what am I gonna do? My hands are ready, and what am I gonna do? Oh God, my heart is ready, and what am I gonna do? My feet are ready, and what am I gonna do? My feet are ready, and what am I gonna do? My feet are ready, My feet are ready, and what am I gonna do? My voice is ready, and what am I gonna do? My voice is ready, and what am I gonna do? My voice is ready, and what am I gonna do? Oh God, my voice is ready, and what am I gonna do? My spirit's ready, and what am I gonna do? My spirit's ready, and what am I gonna do? My spirit's ready, and what am I gonna do? Oh God, my spirit's ready, and what am I gonna do?
Thank you for that lovely music. The music today has been it's been such a gift. A year or so ago, my husband and I took our then 6-year-old son to the American Heritage Museum, which is a military museum just outside of Hudson, Massachusetts, where we live. They have military memorabilia from World War I to the current day. We thought that he would love seeing all the tanks and big trucks, but instead, as I'm sure many parents can relate, he had the exact opposite reaction of what we were expecting. He was terrified. He clung to his dad and he asked to leave. And I realized that we had never told him about war. He didn't know about the Vietnam War or about the Holocaust. His life had been perfectly sheltered from so many of the terrors that growing up in this world can bring. And I struggled with how to explain it, especially as the reality of almost 100 years of human suffering was just there on display for him. As this experience stayed with me in the weeks and months after, it occurred to me that I didn't really have to explain what those tanks were there to do. He understood on a visceral level in a way that many of us adults don't allow ourselves to know anymore. He wasn't able to hide from the reality of this world in that moment, and neither was I, and that is what stayed with me. It was all there on display, and I felt the need to explain it, and I couldn't. The sinking feeling, as well as a question, stayed with me. This question of how do we explain to the children in our lives that though there is great love in this world, there is also suffering, that people can forget the humanity of others and sometimes themselves. And what do we do about that? Whenever there's a major tragedy, many people make reference to Mr. Rogers' famous advice to children. He said, "Look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping." But his advice was for children, not for adults. And while it can be of great comfort for children to look for the helpers so that they can see that the world is still made up of people who will care for them and keep them safe, adults are called to something more. We are called to be the helpers, to look in the face of great tragedy and find the space to love people through the hurt, to let the lives we lead be a reflection of our internal values, and to act from an ethic of love. In her book, All About Love, the author Bell Hooks talks about living with this ethic of love. She stresses the importance of understanding love, not just as a feeling we have, but as a call to action. When faced with moments that we can't understand, or when we look into the face of senseless tragedy and can't recognize ourselves or where to turn, it can be difficult to find hope, to understand where the love could be and how we could make sense of a world that contains such heartbreak. You may be thinking right now about a time that this was true for you. Quite a few people have told me that they feel hopeless right now. They look at climate change, senseless gun violence, the upcoming national elections, the oppression of people of color and trans and non-binary members of our communities, and they feel overwhelmed and without any sense of what to do. In these moments, perhaps a turn to action, a recognition of our roles as helpers, can be a guiding light for many of us. For a while, I was a legislative liaison, which is basically a lobbyist for government agencies at the state capitol in Oklahoma City. I represented a human services agency whose mission was to keep children and other vulnerable populations safe. As one can guess, we were not always the most popular people to darken some of the very conservative legislators' doors. It was difficult work, and my day was often filled with choosing to speak to people who were either openly hostile to me or would be kind to my face and then stab me in the back, or the people who were ostensibly on my side but undermined me at every turn. I sat through hours of committee meetings and watched legislators work to undermine the rights of women and LGBTQIA members of my community, as well as to take actions that I thought would make the world less safe or education less accessible for the children in my community. And now one might presume that this was soul-sucking work that left me depleted and empty at the end of the legislative session. But it wasn't. Though it was hard and I had to swallow many of my feelings, having a purpose made a difference. It somehow made it all easier. I'm sure there are many amongst you, teachers, medical professionals, social workers, and numerous other caregivers for the most vulnerable in our communities who recognize this feeling. That though the world is hard, maybe I can make my little corner of the universe a little less difficult. When I became a Unitarian Universalist, what was remarkable to me most of all was that there was less talk about shoring up our treasures in heaven, as had been much of the religious teachings of my youth, but rather conversations were centered around what are we doing with our time here on earth, right now? How are both our individual and collective actions affecting the world we are currently living in? And that, to me, is the core of how we take care of the most vulnerable in our society, as well as what we are called to teach the children amongst us. We teach them that love is an action that we choose to take, rather than always a feeling. We can choose to see the inherent worth and dignity in others, and we can choose how we manifest that sense of understanding into being. Now, I believe there are three fundamental facets of putting that love into action. First is to identify our empathy, and with that, recognize the humanity in everyone we encounter. Second, it is to do the internal work necessary to ensure we have the proper vision before acting. And of course, third is action itself. As we embark upon a new year of a national election season, many of us are likely already exhausted by the news coverage. I know I am. I know it can be hard to find empathy for the people we feel are threatening the safety of the marginalized voices in our communities. As I'm sure many of you can relate, being from Oklahoma, it is difficult to read comments online made by people in more progressive states saying, we basically brought it on ourselves with who we are electing. We were often feeling the deepest sting of what was happening where we live, and many of us were working every day to fight it, and we felt abandoned, or at the very least misunderstood by many of the people in the rest of the country. Some empathy and perhaps words of encouragement would have likely done wonders for our capacity to just keep going. But I also have to remember that I needed to work harder on those feelings of empathy too. I often looked around at the people in my state and felt frustrated and like things were never going to change. And I can understand why some people might just throw their hands up and say, forget it. close themselves off to people with different points of view than their own. But I think many of us can recognize that there are often larger issues at play that create systems in which people may vote against what we feel is their own interest. Either way, I've never heard of anyone changing their position when they are being harshly judged or dismissed. But this motivation to pursue empathy isn't for them anyway. It's for ourselves. Those of us who are reading the news every day and feeling the pit in our stomachs. There's a quote that's often misattributed to the Buddha, which basically says that anger is like drinking poison and expecting someone else to die. There's a reason this quote has been misattributed to a number of speakers throughout the ages, because it often rings true for so many of us. Our anger, our bitterness, they hurt us. And often because we are blinded by that anger and sometimes unwilling to compromise or find empathy because of it. And we can hurt the very people we're trying to help. Perhaps living within an ethic of love and leading with empathy in our interactions with others can be an antidote to that poison. The second piece of love and action is contemplation, to be thoughtful, to have a plan before you act. Of course, this notion of contemplation before action can be difficult for many of us. I don't know about you, but my immediate response is just want to jump in and get involved, and I get frustrated when I feel people are spending too much time talking and not enough time doing. However, I was moved by a section in a biography of the Reverend Howard Thurman, in which author Paul Harvey recounts a story in which the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had been stabbed and was almost killed at one of his book signings in 1958. Reverend Thurman visited Dr. King in the hospital and encouraged him, as he encouraged many people, to look at this as an opportunity to take a brief step away from the everyday, focus on his life, meditate on its purpose, and then move forward. And then this was at the core of Thurman's teachings, to take time to contemplate your inner life so that you may commune with God or the universe and later act with purpose. In addition to being able to act with precision and purpose, there is also an internal resilience that we need to manifest. A wise friend recently told me something that her spiritual teacher told her. She said, "You have to hold a gallon to give a cup." In other words, you have to care for yourself and do the internal work necessary to ensure you are able to put that love into action. Again, this is going to be a difficult year for many of us. We will want to act and we will want to take part. But if our cup is dry and there are no reserves to refill it, then we will have nothing to give. Now, this leads us to the third piece of putting love into action, which is the action part. It's worth noting that Reverend Thurman encouraged the Reverend Dr. King to meditate on his purpose, but he also recognized that people have a duty to step back into life, pursue community, and take responsibility for the nature of the social order. Now, I certainly worry about an excessive amount of navel-gazing without action that can sometimes take place within our UU movement. We do love a book club, after all. We have to be careful not to get too bogged down in focusing on our own internal liberation that we forget about the external liberation that is at the heart of our faith. Because giving, helping, especially when times are tough, can be a spiritual practice as much as any. What we do in our community and how we act towards others shapes our inner lives more than sometimes we can believe or even recognize. How many times have you volunteered somewhere and come away from it learning more than you likely taught others? Have you gone to a community event or helped someone who could use a hand and felt a tiny piece of your soul was liberated in the process? I know I have. When we live our lives with a focus on fierce love and action that we can share with our families, friends, and communities, we de-center ourselves and our hang-ups and fears and inch ever closer to the beloved community that the Reverend Dr. King spoke about so many decades ago. But this notion of living in love rather than fear is a difficult one. Personally, I'm living with a lot of fear right now. I think many of us are. Certainly many people of color, trans and non-binary people, and other members of our communities living with marginalized identities are living with a fear that I cannot possibly understand. And I want to affirm that this fear is real and it is valid. But for the rest of us who are not living within that sphere of very real and immediate danger, our job is to surround the members of our community in love and to take action when they need to focus on their own survival and emotional well-being. So when this fear threatens to overtake us, how can we keep our wits about us when those we care about are being threatened? The role we have to play in our communities is unique and personal to every individual, but we can rest assured that it is needed, that we collectively as UUs are needed, and reminding ourselves and others that we are on the side of love is needed. Amen, and may it be so.
Please stand as you are able for our closing hymn, which is 1014, Answering the Call of Love.
The promise of Spirit, faith, hope, and love abide.
Thank you again for allowing me to speak with you all today and welcoming so warmly. And I want to thank Sarah and the singers and musicians today as well. Sustained by the time we have spent here together, as we journey away from one another into the week ahead, let us be reminded by our faith's call to love and radical empathy. Let us listen to our own inner voices that will remind us of our best selves. May the love and support of this community remain with you today and throughout this week until you find yourselves back here again. Amen.